All know Yoda as the wise Grand Master of the Jedi Order, a figure of immense power and wisdom who trained Jedi for over 800 years. But what if I told you that the foundation of his incredible power, the very core of his unique philosophy, comes from a master the Jedi would never approve of? A forbidden teacher who found a young, lost Yoda and trained him in secret, shaping him into the legend we know today. For decades, Yoda's origin has been one of the galaxy's most protected secrets, intentionally hidden by George Lucas himself. In the current canon, all we know is that he was trained by an unnamed Jedi Master. But in the vast archives of what is now Star Wars Legends, an incredible story was once told. This is the story of the Master who was erased from the Jedi archives, the forgotten guru who discovered a young Yoda and taught him in ways the Council would never, ever condone. Before we pull back that veil, let's talk about what's officially known. And the truth is, not much. In the official Star Wars canon, Yoda's past is a black hole. We don't even know his species name, a mystery that continues even after we've met Yaddle, and the entire world fell in love with Grogu. George Lucas famously wanted Yoda to be a total mystery, and that wish has been meticulously honored. Any records that might have shed some light were likely destroyed during Palpatine's Great Jedi Purge, conveniently wiping the slate clean. We know he was born around 900 years before the Battle of Yavin, and started training Jedi when he was about 100. We also know he had a master. He says as much to Luke Skywalker. In one book, Yoda even tells a story that his master told him, but the identity of this teacher remains a complete blank. Was this master from Yoda's own species? Was their teaching style traditional? We just don't know. Canon tells us he was brought to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant as a youngling, where his connection to the Force was recognized as one of the strongest they'd ever seen. From there, he trained, rose through the ranks, and eventually became the Grand Master. But that official version feels a little too clean, doesn't it? It's almost too simple for a being as complex and ancient as Yoda. The gaps in the story are massive. Where did he come from? Who found him? How did a member of such a rare species even find their way into the Jedi Order? For those answers, we have to do what the Jedi of the new era often do, look back into the legends of the past. To find this story, we have to step back in time, before the Disney acquisition, to the era of the Star Wars Expanded Universe, now called Legends. This was a massive collection of stories from novels, comics, and games that fleshed out the galaxy in incredible detail. And in those old tales, an origin for Yoda actually existed. It's a story that begins not in the clean, polished halls of the Jedi Temple, but in chaos, fear, and mud. According to a story that first appeared in a 1995 issue of Star Wars Galaxy magazine, a young Yoda had a surprisingly humble goal. He wanted to be a merchant. He and a human friend left their unknown homeworld in a beat-up old ship, looking for work in the core worlds. They were searching for opportunity, but their journey was pretty much doomed from the start. Far from the main shipping lanes, their ship was smashed by an asteroid, a catastrophic failure that sent them spiraling out of control. Alarms blared as their small craft plummeted toward an unknown planet. They crashed, violently, into a world that would feel hauntingly familiar to anyone who's seen Yoda's final days, a dense, foggy swamp world. Their distress beacon was on, but out here, in the forgotten depths of the galaxy, the chances of rescue were next to zero. They were stranded, alone, and fighting for their lives. And it was here, at their lowest point, that they would have their first real encounter with the Force. Days turned into a desperate struggle to survive. Yoda and his friends scavenged what they could from the wreck, and foraged for food, always on guard. The swamp was alive, filled with the sounds of unseen things moving through the murky water. It was during this nightmare that they were finally found. But their rescuer wasn't a Republic scout. He was a being as strange and mysterious as the swamp itself. His name was Nankata del Gormo. He was a Hysalrian, a reptilian being with a humanoid torso, 4 powerful arms, and a long, snake-like tail that let him glide through the bog. His skin was a muted green, perfect camouflage for his environment, and his eyes held a deep, ancient intelligence. He wasn't a Jedi as the Republic knew them. He was a hermit, a sage, a Force master living in total seclusion. Fun fact, The character of Nakata del Gormo was actually born from a fan design an alien contest, a piece of lore so deep it came from the community itself. Nakata del Gormo approached the two survivors not with aggression, but with curiosity. He could sense the raw, untamed presence of the Force in both of them, but it was especially strong in the smaller one, the young Yoda. He told them that the strange feelings they'd been having, the sense of being watched, and the sheer luck that had kept them alive so far, that was the Force, protecting them. He then made them an offer. Stay with him, and he would teach them to harness this power. With no hope of rescue, they accepted. Yoda's Jedi training had officially begun, not in a classroom, but in the mud and mist, under the guidance of a four-armed serpent master. The training Yoda got from Nakata del Gormo was nothing like the rigid, by-the-book instruction of the Jedi Temple. It was raw, instinctual, and deeply tied to the natural world. This is why you could call del Gormo a forbidden master. His philosophy didn't fit into the strict Jedi code of the later Republic. He didn't care about politics or the Senate. His focus was on the living force, the tangible energy of the life all around them. Instead of meditation chambers, they had the entire planet. Nakata del Gormo would have taught Yoda to feel the life force of the plants and the fear of prey. He would have learned to use the Force not as a tool to be ordered around, but as an extension of the world itself. He probably learned telekinesis by lifting rocks from the bog to clear a path. Not for some abstract test, but for the practical purpose of survival. He learned to calm angry beasts not as an exercise, but to keep from being eaten. This was a holistic education, one that saw no difference between the physical and the spiritual. This early training seems to have drilled into him a deep understanding of balance, a philosophy that we see in Yoda's teachings centuries later. Just think of his lessons to Luke on Dagobah. He doesn't start with a lightsaber. He starts by telling Luke to feel the life in the world around him, to understand the forces in the trees, the rocks everywhere. This sounds exactly like what he would have learned from Nakata del Gormo. This kind of training, outside the temple and without the council's oversight, was seriously frowned upon. It was uncontrolled. But that very freedom may have been what allowed Yoda to develop such a uniquely deep connection to the Force. He learned its truths not from a book, but from the world itself. If you're finding this deep dive into forgotten Star Wars lore as fascinating as I do, take a second to hit that subscribe button. We're always digging through the archives to uncover the stories you've never heard, and you won't want to miss what we find next. Yoda's training under the Hysaurian Master was transformative. It gave him a foundation of wisdom that would define the rest of his life. But his destiny wasn't in that swamp. Eventually, years later, that distress beacon they'd activated was finally picked up by a Galactic Republic ship. A starship descended from the clouds, and out walked Jedi Knights of the Republic. The Jedi immediately recognized the immense power radiating from the small green being, and the strange serpentine master who had trained him. They saw in Yoda a concentration of the Force they had rarely, if ever, encountered. Here, on a forgotten planet, was a being with the potential to become one of the greatest Jedi in history. After what must have been a tough goodbye with the master who saved his life, Yoda left the swamp world. He was taken to Coruscant to begin his formal training at the Jedi Temple. Imagine the culture shock. From a life of primal survival, Yoda was thrown into a world of polished marble and strict schedules. Of course, he would have excelled. The Legends timeline says he became a Jedi Master by the age of 96 or 100, an incredibly young age for a species that lives 900 years, and proof of the powerful foundation his first master gave him. But he would never forget his roots. He carried the lessons of the swamp with him. This forbidden knowledge, this different perspective on the Force, would become his secret weapon. While other Jedi focused on the rigid structures they were taught, Yoda had a deeper, more fluid understanding. He knew that the Force was more than just lifting rocks and tricking minds. It was life itself. For the next 800 years, Yoda would become the bedrock of the Jedi Order, training countless students, including future legends like Mace Windu and Count Dooku. He served as the Grand Master for centuries, guiding the Order through peace and war. And yet, If you look closely at the Yoda we see in the films, you can see the echoes of Nkata del Gormo everywhere. His choice of exile on Dagobah seems like no accident. He returned to a world that was just like his first home, a place teeming with life and a strong connection to the living force. It was the perfect place to hide from the Emperor and to learn the path to immortality from Qui-Gon Jinn, another Jedi who valued the living force over the Council's rules. His unique teaching style with Luke also makes perfect sense. He frustrates Luke, challenges everything he thinks he knows, and tells him, "You must unlearn what you have learned." This is the core philosophy of someone who was taught outside the system. He knew the Jedi Order's greatest weakness was its own rigidity. His training of Luke was an attempt to create a new kind of Jedi, one who understood the Force on a more fundamental level, just as he had been taught. Even his lightsaber form, Ataru, which is all about acrobatics and using the environment, seems born from the survival instincts of a small creature in a hostile swamp. He doesn't fight like a duelist in an arena, he fights like a predator, using his size as an advantage to strike from unexpected angles. And then there's his famous speech pattern. Why does Yoda talk like that? Canon just says it's a quirk of his species, though Yaddle doesn't speak the same way. But there's a fascinating piece of behind-the-scenes info that fits perfectly with our Legends story. Dave Filoni once mentioned that Yoda's original voice actor, Frank Oz, had a personal belief that Yoda spoke that way specifically to honor his own master. While it's never been made official, it's a powerful and poetic idea. It suggests that every time Yoda speaks, he's paying tribute to the forgotten, four-armed sage who found him in a swamp and set him on his path. So, we're left with two truths. In the official canon, the story of Yoda's youth is a protected mystery. He was trained by an unknown Jedi Master, and the details are lost to time. This version preserves his mystique, presenting him as a figure who simply was. But in the deeper lore of Star Wars legends, we have the tale of Nkata del Gormo, a serpentine hermit on a forgotten swamp world who taught a shipwrecked Yoda the primal truths of the Force. A master whose methods would be seen as forbidden by the rigid Jedi Order, yet whose wisdom formed the very foundation of the greatest Jedi Master the galaxy would ever know. This forbidden history doesn't diminish Yoda, it enriches him. It transforms him from a symbol of a flawed institution into a far more interesting figure, a student of a forgotten tradition, a secret keeper, a quiet rebel who carried the wisdom of his forbidden master for 9 centuries, patiently waiting on another swamp world to pass it on. But what do you think? Does the story of Nkata del Gormo add a powerful new layer to Yoda's character, or do you prefer his origins to remain a complete mystery? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the hidden corners of the galaxy, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into Star Wars lore. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.